to the Two Marks, exclusively on the Pod Station.
Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Loki, brought to you by the Two Marks. This time we're discussing episode 6, For All Time, Always, the season finale. And once again, the Two Marks are delivering an irreverent review, providing you lively debate, conversation, and social commentary. Has the Citadel received a Kintsungi makeover? Has Miss Minute been moonlighting? Will we find out where Renslayer got her pen? And what happens if two Lokis cross swords? Is this show more like Willy Wonka than the Wizard of Oz? All this and more will be unpacked in this week's episode. Let me introduce my friend and co-host, Mr. Mark Pollard. Hello.
Hi, mate.
I've got to look up at you.
I know, I'm gyrating in your face.
No change there.
For the benefit of the listeners, I'm doing this standing up today because I've been sat down all day, so I'm fidgety, and you're doing it sat down. As we're facing one another, you've basically got a wonderful eyeball shot of my eyeballs.
Balls and eyes are quite apt. Because I'm doing the heavy lifting, I have to sit down.
Well, because of my heavy lifting, you're now level with
Tell that I'm looking at a hernia.
But other than that, I'm excellent. Just watched episode 6, so I'm made up.
What do we think?
Loved it.
Good, wasn't it?
It was.
Was all that you wanted and more?
It wasn't as good as episode 4, as in, like, it was an excellent episode. It was a great climax. There's loads that they've just opened the world up to, but in terms of, like, a finale, it wasn't quite, I don't know. Anyway, we'll discuss it. Don't want to give away too much. If I go too early, no one will need to listen, will they?
Be the shortest podcast ever.
Ever.
I mean, the only highlight is your foreskin flapping in my face.
Oh dear. So moving swiftly on, if people are listening to this for the first time, where have you been for the other 5 episodes? Go back and listen to them. In fact, you want to particularly listen to episode 4, because in episode 4 we pose a question which gives you a chance to win a genuine, authentic TVA jacket merchandise.
All of those words make up your sentence. Yeah, an officially licensed Disney TVA jacket.
That's what I meant to say, but not as eloquently.
The question was...
If you say the question, they won't have to listen to episode 4.
That's very true. The question is found on episode 4 of our podcast.
Haha. Cunning. So go and listen to it, and then just direct messages on any of our social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'll have the polls still running for this episode on our Twitter, so go on and give us a poll review. And we're going to do a whole season review of Loki next, and we might get a couple of guests on. You've got a chance to throw your comments in, and we'll read them out on the show.
Can't say better than that, can you?
You can't indeed. You can email us if you're particularly inclined, the 2marks@thepodstation.co.uk. No one's had the bravery to do that yet.
Be the first.
Be the first. Other than that, I think that's all the promo I'm feeling inclined to do at this moment.
Shall we jump straight in? And
how would you like to get hold of me right now?
To be fair, it's flapping my face. Like alligator Loki, I'll just snap it all up. Might have said that aloud. Shall we jump straight in?
Let's.
Give you the synopsis.
Indeed.
Okay, this week, the clock is ticking in the season finale, which finds Loki and Sylvie on a date with Destiny. Discuss.
I'll ask you, because you've already posed the question to me. What did you think?
I enjoyed it. I was saying to you off air, for a episode that didn't have very much happen, it had a lot happen.
It did. I mean, I'm absolutely made up that my predictions has come true.
What?
That Kang is the big bad.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is that right? Because I'm sure I've got you on record on episode 5 clearly stating that Loki is the big bad.
No, that wasn't
Kang?
me. That must have been another me.
Yeah, who hasn't been scrubbed or pruned.
I was always on the Kang theory.
Were you?
Yeah.
Got you. If you want to listen to episode 1 onwards, where I say...
Actually, hold this thought here. Okay, let's just test your theory. Number 1, was Kang the big bad in this episode? Think carefully, because it's a trick question. I've been Googling shit, so I potentially have what I need to unravel your boastful exterior.
So what you've been Googling?
I've been Googling.
Alright, good start there then. Okay, so what do you want me to say, yes or no?
Was it Kang who's the big bad here?
It was a variant of Kang. To be more accurate, what they've done is they've taken 2 people. The person who I said it was in episode 1, who's the oldest variant of Kang, called Immortus.
Don't believe in people. Go back and listen to episode 1, you will find out he's lying.
He Remains isn't Kang in the comics. What they've done is they've taken that and they've taken Immortus, that's the oldest variant of Kang. I'll break it down later for people who don't know what I'm on about. And they've made them together, but if we're going to jump right to the end of this episode, technically at the end bit, it's Kang. Kang.
But there's two problems. Number one, Immortus isn't Kang, is he?
Yeah.
He's Immortus.
No, but he's a variant of Kang.
But it's Immortus, not Kang.
Which is Kang.
And at no point during this episode did he ever say he was either Immortus or Kang. No, he didn't.
What did he say? Come on.
He said, some people call me Conqueror, some people call me something else.
Strange cowboy.
Yeah, exactly. But at no point did those words come out of his mouth.
I can see your background as a defence attorney.
I'm grasping at straws.
Pay dividends, Your Honour. He didn't say he was Kang. However, anyone who's got more than 12 chromosomes will have worked out Immortus is a variant created by Kang, because anyone who knows the comics will know that in every variation, every universe, Kang creates another alter ego of himself to look after it. Are you literally Googling while I'm talking to you?
Kang.
Which is why, again in the comics, he has the Council of Kangs, all the variants of him that he's made up to look after everything.
Okay.
Have you just got off your Googling now? Are you in no man's land?
No,
You literally have just turned into Immortus, because you've just gone, well, before I knew what was going to happen, but in 5, 6, 7, yeah, no idea now. No idea. I'm literally at the end of time, and no idea what's happening now. Go on. This is exciting.
No, let's move on.
Technically, going by episode 5, Loki was the big bad, wasn't it?
Well, that's what you predicted.
Wow. Anyway, what did you think about that reveal that we all knew?
I mean, first and foremost, let me say that... Bear with.
You can just say, okay, Google, can you tell me who Kang is? Bear in mind, it's the same guy who's cast as Kang the Conqueror in Ant-Man and Quantumania.
Well, he hasn't been yet. Jonathan Majors, who plays He Must Not Be Named, or whatever it is that they've given him.
I think that's Harry Potter.
You know what I mean. I thought he played a mesmerising part in this episode on the basis that all he did was talk for the entire episode. I never took my eyes off the guy, because of his mannerisms and his way he was delivering his lines and the pauses, and I thought he was brilliant.
Look forward to seeing him in Ant-Man 3. If you want to IMDb, he has been cast in it.
Has he?
As Kang.
Right.
I promise you. He has. I knew this would come up. I checked before we went into this because I knew you'd bring it up. This episode didn't really do much. It was a kind of a three-hander, the two Lokis and him for most of it. And then when you go to the other one, it was almost a three-hander. It was Mobius, Judge Renslayer and B-19.
I mean, Kang, sticking with Kang, I'm particularly interested. I think Kang's going to be the big bad like Thanos was. So it might be for phase 4, 5 and 6, Kang's the big pain in the ass that everyone has to overcome during the course of those films. And what's interesting is that there's going to be lots of different versions of Kang knocking about. So different superheroes from the Avengers will come up against the same character, but who will potentially have completely different motives and personalities and aims and plans. That makes it quite interesting. I mean, put it this way, Jonathan's not going to be out of work for a while, is he? If that really does happen. But I think what I particularly like, I think this is what was achieved in this episode. They've created a big bad who's grey. So, like Thanos, so there is no disputing that what Thanos did, i.e. wipe out the lives of kabillions of people because of the universe, was a bad thing. It was done with sort of good motives. He was basically an extremist environmentalist, wasn't he? He was, we need to curb the population in order to save the universe. If we are to continue to survive as people in this universe, we need to have fewer people because we will overuse and therefore we will destroy, because I've seen it firsthand on my planet. Albeit you can't justify his means, the theory behind it is good, and that made him a wonderfully, what's the word I'm looking for?
Benevolent dictator.
No, nuanced.
Oh.
He was wonderfully nuanced as a character, because albeit he was a baddie because of all those things, actually, if you stripped it back, if you'd have gone about it another way, you'd have probably gone, well, actually, yeah, that's a very noble thing you're trying to do. You're trying to save the whole of the universe from almost destroying itself and making itself extinct. Your methods perhaps leave somewhat to be desired. And Kang's a bit the same, because what they've essentially said is there's good Kangs, there's bad Kangs, there's Kangs in the middle, there's Kangs who want to save the universe, there's Kangs who want to rule the universe. You know what I mean? There's lots of different versions. This one wasn't bad. Again, he fully admits he's a baddie in this, but he's grey. He's like Loki, because what he said was, I am probably one of the least bad versions of me. And so what I've done is I've created a single timeline so that you only have to deal with me, because I'm not here to cause people grief. I'm not here to destroy the universe or rule it. What I'm doing is I'm just maintaining a timeline that avoids lots of way worse me's from getting their hands on the wheel, which is a bit like Thanos. It's sort of a good motive. There's questions over basic essence of it. He is a dictator of time. That's not a good thing, but the reason why he's doing it is to stop something worse from happening. And so, whilst again I'm not saying I'm not on Team Kang, by the way, and I know it sounds like I possibly am. I think what I'm trying to say is he's someone who becomes nuanced. You can't just stand there and go, he's the baddie, I hate him. Actually, you can sort of go, I can sort of see what he's saying, which makes him a more interesting character rather than just that mustache twirling moron in the corner who goes, I'm going to destroy the universe, ha 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 ha.
I think what we need to be mindful of is that Loki is an interpretation for the benefit of the MCU. If you'll just permit me to break it down,
please.
I want to return to something that you brought up in episode 2 of our podcast.
Oh, is this? I would have listened to the shows if I'd have known that everything I've ever said was going to be held accountable.
Oh, we're doing Loki, because hang on, let me just print out what you just said.
Or I would have deleted all the shows.
Literally, this is the worst show for you to rebuttal, because everything you have done is recorded like the TVA. And actually, it was a positive thing that I picked up on.
Oh, okay. Well,
no, you want that now?
Okay. Yeah.
Don't delete that bit. Anyway, let me first of all give you the breakdowns of all of the streams and branches that you've created. He Who Remains is an actual comic book person who was basically the sole survivor from a past universe, and he founded the new TVA. Very old, appeared in the 1976 Thor comic, All Powerful. He's what they've retconned into this, so Loki has interpreted it, changed his backstory to aid the MCU. He doesn't say Immortus, but out of all of the variants that exist of Kang, Immortus is the eldest. Now, I did say episode 1 that I thought Immortus, it was going to be either him or Ramatut that I mentioned last week. Going into the creation of Kang, Nathaniel Richards, who is actually a descendant of Reed Richards, who you'll know is Mr. Fantastic.
Elastic. Isn't he the Elastic
He can
one?
bend. He's from Fantastic Four. Ties into whether he's going to appear in the Fantastic Four. Also, the Avengers had to deal with Kang, but Kang doesn't have any superpowers. He's not powerful at all. He is literally...
I know this because I googled it earlier.
Did you Google it? Okay.
If Google like to be a sponsor of the show.
Well, you've got your money's worth if they are, I'll tell you what. When I mentioned last week, one of his other variants is Ramatut, because he was flying around in his spaceship that looked like a sphinx. He ended up being Pharaoh Ramatut. He was actually looking for N. Sabanur, who is Apocalypse, and you'll know from the X-Men movies, now part of the MCU, so you might see him in that. Brings in the X-Men and the Fantastic Four. He created all the different variants, so Immortus, Ramatut are all there. Simply creates technology like time-travelling Iron Man, with the massive twist at the end of this episode proves Kang's the villain. If you've seen the twist that I'm referring to.
I have. I did. I remained around.
The thing that is important to note, that He Who Remains created the Time Twisters in a different universe, and they started messing around with time. He stepped in, Jane Foster got involved, and at this point there's two different realities, which ones the Time Twisters work on and the ones that the time variant deals with. What he's done, as you rightly say, he's brought them all into one. And what this brings you to when you say they've killed Kang, do you mean MCU or do you mean Loki?
I don't know. What do you mean?
Because either way, it applies to something that you were talking about. I think it was another time you had time to Google. It was a second episode. You were talking about determinism. Oh, remember? We were talking about determinism versus...
Well, I've got that on my notes now.
Oh, have you? Okay.
Yeah.
Determinism versus causality, which means that either way you either realise that Kang was always going to become Kang because it was predetermined, or because Loki killed Immortus / He Who Remains created the villain. As a result of killing Immortus, they created the branch timelines. He says to Sylvie, I'll see you again. We don't know whether he's actually dead. It's in that other subject matter that you love so much, which is time travel.
Yes.
And the other thing it brings you on to is the fourth timekeeper, who in the comics was sent back to Egypt as the Oracle of Siva.
Right.
You don't know whether that's because of the multiverse war. What you've got is the self-determinism. It would have always happened. The causality of the Lokis, and that was how we got the answer to the spike in episode 3, Lamentis. Two of the Lokis that should never have got together to kill Kang, and that created that spike that nobody had seen before.
Got you.
It's all very exciting because we have an idea of where this can all go.
Well, it's opened up an enormous sandbox for them to play in.
The opening shot out probably one of the most unusual ones because it covered the beginnings of the MCU. If you wanted to do it chronologically.
Well, Captain America was in there, wasn't he, as well?
Loads in there. I mean, they've just taken sound bites of all the main characters and then they tied it into our own history. So you had Neil Armstrong, our friend Greta Thunberg, who hasn't been pruned. Maybe she's a variant of who actually went to school.
How dare you!
Don't be mean to our Greta.
It's not being mean, is it? She's put herself on a pedestal to be there. Also, by the way, Greta, CO2 isn't going to destroy the planet. It's got a greenhouse warming potential of 1. Sulfur hexafluoride has a global warming potential of 22,800. Hashtag just saying.
I should be back in school.
What a random fact to throw in.
Fact, thank you. I'm glad you said that.
Well, I did say that. I haven't fact-checked it.
So she gets mentioned, and Nelson Mandela, Alan Watts, anyone who knows, was quoting from his 1972 recording Time and Where It Changes, saying that time isn't a straight line, it can go anywhere. That was a nice beginning.
How did we feel about the Citadel entrance scene? You've got the 2 Lokis. You can see how much it means to Sylvie because she even has to take it sort of a moment to get her bearings before they go in.
The 2 Lokis, although they are a variant of themselves, the difference between the Loki we know, we followed his death and rebirth and death and the circular path it takes. We don't know much other than she was pruned at a young age.
You see, I pulled up on that when I heard that. I think she means her timeline was pruned, not that she was pruned. Because if she'd been pruned, she'd have been to that place that they escaped from before, previously, and she hasn't.
Her timeline was pruned.
That was what confused me when she said it, because the way she said it suggests that she as an individual had been pruned. Actually, what she meant when I thought about it was that her timeline had...
She's essentially been on the run from an age of, let's call her 9, for the sake of arguing, has now been orphaned.
9.5.
The whole of her time, everything she knows is now gone on the run. That if she hadn't have pickpocketed the temp pad, would have been pruned and would have ended up on the planet with Alioth that Kang refers to in his monologue. She would have been if she wasn't on the run. She's become a result of her environment. She's never had a childhood. She's had to grow up really quick, having to scavenge, having to do whatever she needs to do to feed herself and survive. We don't know where she's been. She's been living in extinction level events to keep off the radar, which can't be the most luxurious of places.
It's not going to be fun and games.
They went to Pompeii, so imagine living and having to be mindful of, oh, it's Tuesday. Tomorrow is when Pompeii blows up. I've got to be on the run. It can't be a great upbringing. I understand completely why she did what she did. However, the causality of that, which you could argue was predetermined based on her upbringing, the other Loki doesn't want that to happen.
You see the big difference between the 2 Lokis in this episode in their journeys as individuals. Sylvie is still on the mission she started out on from the outset and is still continuing on that mission with her end goal. Our Loki, on the other hand, has actually lived another life and has now had the benefit of watching that. He now has the benefit of hindsight, literal hindsight, because he can see what happens if he continued to follow the path he was already on. He's now had the benefit of being able to be more self-aware than he could ever have hoped to have been, and that has fundamentally changed him, whereas Sylvie is still on that same road, and whilst her interaction with him might have changed her slightly, it's not anywhere near to the same extent as him, because he's not even remotely close to the Loki of New York just 6 episodes ago.
Absolutely right, because the first bit when they get through the door, Sylvie's composed herself. We see the shady, sneaky Miss Minutes.
Oh, I don't like her anymore.
I mean, I think
she's a right sneaky cock. What?
I think you suggested that you thought she was the villain behind it all at one point. I mean, you mentioned everyone. Prince Andrew, you threw in one time, was the villain.
I think that she's still... I mean, we'll come to this, but the files that have been passed to Renslayer by Miss Minutes is obviously going to have something to do within the future arc. I'm still not entirely convinced she hasn't been involved, but she's clearly not the big bad, because Immobius,
or
whatever his name is.
You're making Marvel villains up now on the hoof. Well, methinks you've been tarnished. Fruit of the poison tree is what I'm going to start presenting as a defence here, Your Honour. I think she has been shady for different reasons that you probably do know because of Google, but for season 2, we'll come on to that. However, the point I was making was that the opportunity for Loki to go back to his old ways was presented. He was given the opportunity to rule. He was given the opportunity to be the conqueror over the 2012 New York, to get the Infinity Stones and have the gauntlet. Probably sees what happens after you click it. I mean, it's never good, is it, when you click it? So he's putting it now. So he has had his full redemption story. Let's not forget, Sylvie is a mashup of the Enchantress, and all they've done is the same with with Immortus and He Who Belongs. So they've done it with her character as well.
Remains. You're just making his name up now.
Well, I thought I'd take a leaf out of the Book of Temporal Mechanics by M. Pollard. She clearly is on a mission. They have a bit of a fallout, don't they? In a nice way, because it wasn't a bad fallout. They just showed off their
What do you
fighting.
mean? They were trying to slash each other with swords. I mean, listen, if you ever want to have a nice fallout with me, please don't bring your knife action like they did, because that won't be considered as nice from my perspective.
I won't.
Please. And we're all assuming that they weren't trying to kill one another, but they were swinging those swords mightily feistily.
Don't forget, we've seen Iron Man fight off Captain America, Winter Soldier. We saw Civil War where everybody was at it. You can't tell me that they were really trying to kill them.
Oh, I'm not saying they were, but if I was a betting person and someone was swiping a sword with full vigour and full rotation of their arm towards a person, I'd be going, yeah, if that connects, that's not going to end well.
I would agree if it was a member of the public, but we're looking at two Lokis skill leveled up to the same level. Essentially, they're voiding each other out. They're equally leveled. Every move that she would do, he would counter. And that's why I'm saying I don't think if it was with you or I, what would we be goners, wouldn't we?
God, we'd have killed each other.
Meant if she was against one of us,
Oh.
Sylvie, between her and both of us, we'd still both die.
Yeah, definitely.
They're both Lokis, they're both trained, they've both got swords or daggers. I think they just counter each other, and they could do that all day long, which is a kind of a similarity to Civil War, where Captain America and Iron Man are just beating the living daylights out of each other. When we see in Endgame, when Captain America is fighting a variant of himself, he says, I can do this all day.
Well, He says it right in the first one.
And even Taskmaster skilled in all of the fighting styles of all of the Avengers. If it was anyone else, I think they'd probably get killed. All they're doing is sparring.
The whole Sylvie Loki comparison is quite fascinating, particularly in this episode. You see when they're looking at each other and he's going, I've been there, I've felt that way. He sort of has, insofar as he's lost all his family at some point. Although he hasn't, he's seen when he's lost all his family.
Yeah.
And throughout his life, he's always struggled about the adoption and not knowing it and not feeling like he fits in somewhere. But fundamentally, the difference between Sylvie and Loki is Loki's had a silver spoon well and truly rammed up his bum, whereas Sylvie's had diddly squat. And that's where I see those two very much differ, because he has the luxury of having been able to change and evolve, whereas she doesn't have that luxury at all.
No, she's a survivor, isn't she? He's managed on his wits.
But he's always had Odin to clear up his mess, or Thor to clear up his mess. He's always had his mum to put her arm around her and go, I still love you even though you're a big flaming dope.
Parental impact has been greater for our Loki than Sylvie. That's where their stories diverge. So I can see both story arcs have now fulfilled their natural curve. Loki has received the full redemption.
Well, it was really selfless when they're looking at each other and he says, all I want, and when he was like about to say is you, I was going to be, hey, that's really weird. It doesn't matter how you say it. It feels very romantic, but not at the same time. It feels inherently odd and uncomfortable.
Have you from Neston?
He got 6 toes. He followed it on by saying, for you to be okay, which is an inherently selfless thing to say. If he says, I just want to be with you, that's, I want to possess you, I want to be with you, I want you to be mine, which is a very selfish thing. Whereas he didn't say that. What he said is, I just want you to be okay. Because I think what he recognises is the pain she's going through is a pain he can empathise with. But I think what he also sees is how much harder she's had it to perhaps how he's had it. And that's why his sympathy is even greater. That's why he's like, look, I just want you to get through this and be okay. I want you to find peace that perhaps he's starting to feel, even though he's in a bit of a shitty situation. Ultimately, he's got the potential of getting back onto a timeline again. He doesn't have to go through all the heartbreak and hurt that perhaps he's gone through, because at this point he's been offered to be the king of the timeline. He can decide what it is that happens, so he can keep his mum alive, he can keep his brother alive, you know, he can keep everything as he wants it, really.
It shifts up how time travel works. I was saying, I think in either episode 1 or 2, that it was like the Wizard of Oz and you want to see who's behind the curtain. This now becomes a Willy Wonka-esque ending, because they're handing over the baton to those who have proven themselves. So Immortus, or He Who Belongs,
or be named, or remains,
He Who Should Never Be Mentioned. He's been wanting to see how these two have acted across the course of this season. Now he knows fundamentally they've managed together, which is why Miss Minutes welcomes them, because it's like you've won the game. He's tired, he wants to pass it over to them, and they would run the TVA and keep order. So he's trying to keep order, but in a dictatorship fashion. At the beginning, when we were talking, you brought up about it being like Korea, and it's very, this is how it is, and if it's not this way, well, then you're going to get yourself pruned. Actually, what you do see, and it goes back to that comment made by Loki, which is not everyone who's bad is bad, and not everyone who's good is good.
I think this is the wonder of the Marvel universe, that they always create that unambiguous situation. You quite rightly refer to my predeterminism discussion in previous episodes, whenever it was.
Episode 2.
Thank you. This is another great example, and I think in that episode I said, I feel like free will, and whether it's a good thing or whether it's a bad thing, will be a debate which has pros and cons of equal measure on both sides, and will be a theme that runs through these next few Marvel phases, in the same way as we got in Civil War about should we as superheroes be restricted in what we do because we can cause so much damage and in the wrong hands, or should we be allowed to be free because we shouldn't be run by a specific body who could be open to corruption. And that fight scene was another amazing example of that, because Loki's going, well, look, let's just think about this for a second. She's going, what we're thinking about? It's like, well, we need to consider the pros and the cons of both of these things. He wasn't arguing one way or the other, but he was quite right in saying, well, you're right, if you remove the dictator, who steps into the void? Do we get worse? And she's like, well, yeah, but you're not getting free will. So she's right, because people should have free will, but he's sort of right in saying, yeah, no, but if free will comes with absolute carnage, chaos and mass destruction, is it a price worth paying? I don't know. Let's debate it. And you can see he's trying to avoid all the mistakes he's made previously, because he who shall never mention his name ever again quite literally says, you can have it all, you can be in charge, you can have the throne, you can do everything you want to do, you can do everything you've tried to do and failed at previously. And Loki is quite literally like, nah, do you know what, I've been there and it didn't particularly work out well the first time, I don't want to do that anymore.
It's an interesting turn of events now, isn't it? Because he has been passed the keys to the kingdom of a kingdom that he doesn't particularly want, or in fact need, because I think all he ever wanted was not be alone.
He's realised through this series, hasn't he?
This is why season 2 will work really well, because of the things that have been left open. But the good thing this season did do is answered a lot of the questions that we've been asking.
Not like who's got the figgy port. We still don't know who's got that.
Who's got the what?
The figgy port.
No one knows who's got that.
Oh, no one knows.
That's the unknown. He, moving into season 2, is going to be left with a lot more decisions to make. It also does address the question that you brought up last week. I said that maybe they would both share the MCU, and you thought that might not be a thing. Potentially, the way this has gone does leave open for them both to dip into this as and when they want to. We do know that Loki is going to be in Doctor Strange 2.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. And we know Kevin Feige's gone on record and he stated very clearly that WandaVision, Loki, Spider-Man, No Way Home or Get Yourself Home, and Doctor Strange 2, and even What If, because now cleverly in a month's time What If comes out. Now What If is based on the perennial question, what if Iron Man didn't defeat Thanos? What if you get Captain Britain, which is what Agent Carter becomes? These are all different multiverse timelines. What you could find yourself having is WandaVision, Loki, What If, Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, and all of those are together as one, and in between all that you've got all the standalone movies which don't actually affect anything. They just open the Marvel universe further.
Well, they do. I was trying to make a note of some of the key threads that we've pulled on so far in the TV series, and indeed Spider-Man Far From Home, where you've got the Skrull who can change, so we don't know who they are, where they are, what they're doing, and plus there's going to be a galactic battle between them and their arch nemesis, whose name escapes me.
Are you getting mixed up? Secret Wars isn't the same as Secret Invasion.
What I'm saying is those things are bubbling and simmering in the background in various forms.
If we're going to have like the comics, so we've had Civil War, we have the Secret Invasion, which involves the Skrull shape-shifted into people in power, like Mystique in one of the presidents. In terms of the Secret Wars, that actually is potentially something they could do. Because of the multiverse and the implications of the multiverse, you have the war between different iterations of superheroes.
Yeah.
I don't think, maybe you would agree, that we ain't going to see that till phase 5.
We went through 3 phases before we got the big Thanos, and I'm assuming they're going to do the same again. They're going to do another 3 phases to allow them to build up to the next enormous climax, and I think it's going to be much the same. And so we've got that, you've got whatever the Eternals is going to throw up, you've even got more based on the planet, you've got the whole blip and the outcome of that, which I know is more Earth based, but certainly hasn't exactly done Earth any favours. There's an awful lot of turmoil going on. You can see they've planted some heavy duty seeds that are are already starting to grow in all kinds of ways. And what Loki's done with the multiverse opening up has just opened up just a whole range of stuff.
Just to pick up on a point you made last episode, that you didn't think they would introduce Kang so soon. I said they would, and you were like, well, why would they? Because Thanos wasn't introduced for like 3 phases. I think they've done it the way they have. It's because I don't think Kang's the big bad.
Okay.
I've said it when people listen to our...
Oh, here we go, referring back to his previous ones, people.
Check out my previous work on the podstation.co.uk when we did our Captain Marvel podcast, Film Podyssey.
Which you can also find on the Two Marks channel.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. We've integrated them. I suggested that some of the villains that we would probably see would in fact be Kang the Conqueror, Galactus, Adam Warlock, he could appear. These are all bigger villains, Galactus being one of the biggest ones. Kang has no powers. Take away his technology, all he's got, he's a genius human.
He's just a dickhead with a fancy phone, really.
Well, it's like if you suddenly found, which is what happened, you found yourself a time spaceship.
Is that how you get around in time?
Yeah,
spaceships?
Time spaceships, yeah, like a TARDIS. Okay, just a time ship. If you're walking down the street in your trouser pants,
you trip over a time ship.
Well, you fall into it and you go, whoa, hang on a minute. And the next minute you suddenly go, oh, I think I'll whiz around here. You could affect all of the different times. For me, that would make sense that you introduce this person here, because while this is going on over here, Marvel's very quickly doing stuff over here, and we go, oh yeah, Kang. And he will probably pop up. He's definitely going to be in Ant-Man 3. And I imagine we're going to have reference to him in Doctor Strange 2. We'll see him in Season 2 Loki, definitely, because he's essentially running the TVA now.
Well, he was already running the TVA. It's just a different Kang that's now...
The variant of him, who was the one who just couldn't be asked anymore, is due for retirement, wants to get his golden watch.
Lazy bastard.
We may even find out who the fourth timekeeper was, flip back when they went to Pompeii.
Yeah, but what do you mean by the fourth time? Because that's on the presumption that the other 3 existed, but as we found out with the animatronic robot things, that did they ever exist?
At some point they did, yeah. So the fourth timekeeper, one was banished to Egypt, and that's why you could argue the statue of the fourth timekeeper was destroyed. Was it done during the multiverse wars? We don't know. This is all left open. However, there's 4 timekeepers. Let's not get caught up in the Marvel TV show. A lot of this has been adapted to allow Marvel to go, right, this is going here, this is going here. Throw that into Doctor Strange 2. I'm not sure whether you've gone back and watched the last episode of WandaVision. Have you done that? Disney, very cleverly, they did it with Endgame. They CGI things out of stuff for the benefit of trailers or early teasers, so fans don't work out what it is before they've even shown it. But if you go back and watch the last episode of WandaVision, you'll see at the end credit scene where the camera is panning across the trees towards the cottage, you'll see a shadowy figure on the cliffside that looks remotely like Doctor Strange. And as we know, Wanda is going to be in Doctor Strange 2.
But is she going to be bad?
If she's Scarlet Witch, she'll be bad.
Okay.
And then you might throw in Mephisto, because everybody loves Mephisto, don't they?
I don't know. It might be a thing you enjoy in the bedroom, but...
I'm glad you went there.
Now, the TVA thing.
Yes.
So at the very end, Loki comes back to what he thinks is the TVA,
yes.
and he thinks
this bit.
Morbius is his Morbius and whatever. Because it sort of ties into where we think the TVA just generally sat in this episode as a whole. And it turns out that none of them recognise him, and there's a big statue of Kang, which suggests that he's taken over in a slightly different role, in a different way. I suppose, the obvious statement is that, rather, let me tell you how I sort of ordered it in my head, and you can tell me why it's wrong, and then we can refer back to it on another day. But
hang on.
Because a lot of people have been saying, well, the TVA is outside of the timeline, and therefore, how does that happen? But actually, time's irrelevant, isn't it, for the TVA? So when the multiverse was created, Kang, whichever version of Kang's now in charge of it, could at any point have taken over that TVA at any point that they wanted to, because they would have had the technology to go around with it, join it there, or change their mind and join it somewhere else.
Where the TVA sit is outside. I said to you that it could well be in the quantum realm, and Chronopolis that we saw in Ant-Man and the Wasp, where Kang lives, that's his citadel. This citadel is at the end of time, but it's not at the end of time, it's just before the end of time, because that's why after 10 seconds he didn't have a fucking clue what was going on. He is probably one of the most benevolent of the variants of Kang. All the others want to destroy and take over. That's all they want to do. That's the whole purpose of his character. You ain't going to rewrite the character.
What do these other Kangs want to do when you say destroy and take over?
When Nathaniel found and created this time traveling ship, basically basically he went round different times and created another variant. So it's essentially cloning yourself. In fact, he retired in ancient Egypt. You aren't omnipotent. He hasn't any powers. So the only way you're going to keep control of a universe is to create a variant of yourself. It shows you in his explanation that different variants were doing different things, and they use the circle of time philosophy as their guide to make it easier for people to understand time travel. A lot of people don't understand quantum mechanics.
I should at this point out that Marvel has definitely not necessarily stayed within the purviews of physics and science for the purposes of storytelling.
To be fair, we didn't do an endgame one. I had about 25 pages of notes. I can't find it to hand. They use about 5 or 6 different types of time travel to explain different parts. We would have been doing a 4-hour show if we'd have done a film odyssey on Endgame. I had umpteen pages of notes on it.
He's not bitter about that, people. Because I didn't do any.
We just didn't get around to recording, did we?
We didn't. We're busy and important people, mate.
By the time we would have done it, everybody was like...
No one cared.
Well, no, exactly. I think we're in lockdown and people were worried about other stuff. I think they've tried to keep it simple. Is they've said, right, okay, the multiverse was a thing. We've kept it linear. You talked about how...
Thank you. Credit where credit's due, young man.
You know I will. Technology was very analog, very dated, very perestroika-style technology with cassettes and things, and, everything was all 80s looking. That's been done on purpose. If you think about tape as just a linear thing, you can either go forwards or back. It's very singular. Whereas the multiverse, well, you saw the branches happening as soon as he was dying. With that in mind, he's basically been the boy with his finger in the dike.
I'm glad you chose your words carefully there.
He's been holding back these other variants of Kang in whatever comic book reference you want to give them, because he knows for a fact that if they were in charge, they wouldn't be. And if you think about all the Lokis being pruned, the reason they were being pruned is because they create chaos. As we go back to your point of how our Loki then goes back to Mobius and B15, they aren't bothered about Loki because the person who's now in charge wants chaos. And also, they don't know who he is, do they?
No.
Suppose like Back to the Future, when you see his arm disintegrating, the only other one would be Johnny Darko, related to Donnie Darko. Yeah, his younger brother. Those type of timelines, the implications of doing something over here has impacted that.
Well, it's the butterfly effect, isn't it?
Although that's chaos theory you just created there. Anyway, listeners get the idea. Whatever's happened, the result of Immortus being stabbed has now meant that the timeline has shifted and he's gone back.
Do we think Kang's wiped everyone's brain then, which is why they don't recognise Loki? Because he's gone in, and because there's now a new remit for everyone to follow, is Morbius is obviously going to be going, no, I'm not having that, that's wrong, and he's gone, right, wipe his brain. The reason why I mention it is because in this episode I would have quite happily just had the entire episode of Loki, Sylvie, and Hera shall never mention ever anything ever again. It could have just been an episode on those because of the complexities of what they were doing, and indeed because it was so fascinating to watch, and then had that twist at the very end. They didn't need the Renslayer Morbius scene, and they didn't particularly need the school scene where B62 Cream shows Renslayers having been a real person at some point, because actually all of that's irrelevant now if their brains have been wiped. But there must be a relevance to it in order for them to have shown it, because Marvel don't just show stuff for the sake of just showing it.
Got it in my Easter egg section.
Well, dig it out of there.
It's set in 2018, which is the year of the snap or the blip. It shows where the pen came from. In episode 1, Mobius says, someone else brought this. It's the school that she went to, that she was a teacher. Rebecca Torminate, that's the name of the person in the comics, and that she changes her name to when she has a falling out with Kang. As I mentioned last episode, Renslayer is actually a princess from the 42nd century. However, in the comics, Torminate is from the year 1903, not 2018. But that's the year of the snap. They've positioned that quite nicely. I'm assuming they can revisit that like they did with Falcon, Winter Soldier. WandaVision touched upon the effects of the blip or the snap. It also gives her character something to do because she's going off to seek free will.
But is she? She was obviously given some specific files, and we don't know whether it was a good thing or a bad thing that she was given the files that she was given. Immortus clearly has given her something which he thinks will help combat what's about to happen in the off chance that it happens, i.e. that he gets killed.
He knew that was going to happen up until the point of...
Yeah, but he's obviously made an educated guess. It's an insurance policy, isn't it?
Miss Minute, everyone thought, was behind it. She's not behind it per se. She has plausible deniability. If XYZ happen, you need to give this person this envelope, as you rightly say. When she hands her the files, she says, these aren't the ones that I asked for. And she goes, these are the ones that he says you need. These could be places in time that she needs to go to. She's got a temp pad to keep ahead of what's coming around the corner. Now what we're saying is there are other variants creating havoc, ties into Doctor Strange 2. The one that's in charge charge of the TVA. He hasn't wiped anyone's minds. All that's happened, a different outcome.
I don't understand that bit. It's different in the TVA because time is irrelevant. So what you're saying is that their universe has changed by change of ownership. What I'm saying is, well, what has happened, because time's not relevant, what's happened should have always existed, except other Kang can come in and say, right, I'm going to pick it up from here and this is how it's going to be going forward.
Don't forget, we've been told time's relevant in the TVA. He's been holding back the gates himself.
Right.
So he's been doing a Gandalf. They've killed Gandalf. Immediately, whoever's come through the gates has taken over. Thus changing.
Okay.
I don't know why I did that then. I'm not on Drag Race. Changing the whole outcome. So Kang now is in charge and they are now following his rules.
Yeah.
They aren't bothered about Loki. Sylvie now is free to do what she wants.
Well, we don't know what's happened to Sylvie, do we? Because there's every chance that the other Kang or the next Kang's come along and caused her a few problems.
Because I'm saying it's a mashup of her being an enchantress, we may find moving into season 2, she takes on the mantle of the enchantress for season 2, and all Marvel done have just set everything up, same as they are here. Now, don't forget, we've got other characters, because I think Immortus, who married Vision and Wanda, because Mantis was in attendance to the wedding.
Yeah, Vision marries Wanda.
The person who married them.
I mean, I don't know how I know that. I've obviously read it on Google at some point, or Wikipedia, because that's always correct.
People love
if you'd
that.
like to be on the show.
You can't even cite that if you're doing a degree, can you?
It's made up.
Made up. There's other characters that we're familiar with from MCU, i.e. Mantis from Guardians of the Galaxy, that are already established. It'd be quite nice if they drew upon all those characters using what we've set up in Loki. Good to know that no one really died.
Well, so Renslayer was still a definite disciple of the way things were, and I feel she's gone off to try and salvage, save, reintroduce that. So we're obviously going to see her, and to what extent and in what capacity will remain to be seen, but I think she's been given what she needs in order to try and invoke what was already in place again. Morbius, I think we've definitely got a different Morbius now, and I know it's like he doesn't recognise Loki, but the question is, are we going to get the same Morbius we had before, that sort of cool, laid back, nice, friendly one who had a job to do but did it in a certain way, or are we going to get someone who's just a proper dick?
I think you might get Dick Mobius,
which would be quite interesting to see. Just seeing, it's a bit like the guy who's playing Kang. It'd be fascinating to watch them play the same person but have the freedom to do them in a completely different way, because the circumstances have changed. So you can have like 4 different Kangs who all have different personalities, so he can act them in a completely different way. And someone like Owen Wilson, it'd be quite nice to see him play something that isn't Owen Wilson but in good Marvel clothes.
Yeah, let's not forget the idea of using Kang as a cipher character is wonderful. He ties into the X-Men, the Avengers, the Fantastic Four. Kang is probably one of the few characters created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby who has had some time or other interacted with most of the characters. So if you think about the fact that now with the Fox merger, it wouldn't be unusual to use that as a stepping stone and allude to the fact that Reed Richards is a descendant, Victor Von Doom is also a descendant of Kang the Conqueror. They could bring all of them in and it wouldn't feel jarring because it's canon.
There is a danger. I think the other, well, I was going to say there's a danger, but actually I'll stop myself, because I think one of the things that Marvel has done so incredibly successfully in this series is they've had a massive climax and have told a story that hasn't required crash bangs and wallops. So in WandaVision, everyone was like, oh, WandaVision's amazing and it's great and it's all so different. Alright, it was different to a part if you ignore the first 3 episodes, which was slightly weird and boring, but in the middle it was good and it was different and you could see what they were trying to do. But fundamentally the last episode was a big crash bang wallop fight between 2 baddies at the end, in the same way as every comic book film has sort of ended. Even with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, there was lots of crash bang and wallops throughout that series, and again there was a big fight at the end, etc, etc. This one we didn't have that, did we?
No.
We had lots of twists and turns. It was an emotional twist as opposed to a physical crash bang twist, which felt refreshing for me, because there is a danger people could become comic book saturated. And I don't mean people like me and you, because me and you are idiots and we'll just keep on watching these things forever because we love them and they're great. However, Marvel aren't going to keep making them for just me and you, are they? No. Or for any nerds who are listening to this show. They want to be able to show it to people who enable them to keep on making the money they're making so they can keep on making the films that they're producing. And so they have to keep it different in order to keep them engaged, because otherwise my missus is going to start getting bored.
Yeah, I mean, there is that, isn't there? To be fair to Marvel, I think they've managed to achieve it, particularly with the movies. I mean, I suppose with the TV show, shows, because it's on Disney Plus, there's a whole plethora of shows on Disney that you can watch if you're not a Marvel fan. And there's probably shows that a lot of Marvel fans haven't even seen. I could probably name 6 different shows that people won't have seen.
Yeah, but I'm talking within the bubble that we're in.
Yeah, don't forget, the bubble that we're in is also Marvel now because they've got the rights back into it. You may be seeing Netflix-type characters popping up in their new shows, which might mean that you probably want to watch those shows if you want to understand who they are. It pays dividends to have that. Talking specifically about the movies, you think about likes of Ant-Man and the Wasp. It's a popcorn movie, but it also gets fans.
Thomas the Tank Engine was in there.
Yeah, is that why you went it?
I loved it, yeah.
And then you see the Easter egg from last episode when I mentioned Yellow Jacket's head. We know now he's going to be in Quantumania.
Right.
As you say, they don't do things by mistake. They've planned this. They've probably had an extra 12 months with COVID to plan it all.
I did feel an air of satisfaction with what they've left me with here. I've seen Black Widow, so I won't go into it because I don't want to spoil it for anyone, and I'm sure we'll do an episode entirely based on that. But Black Widow for me was more of a return to Marvel films, whereas this felt the different thing that everyone keeps on telling me WandaVision was, whereas I felt WandaVision went quirky for the first 3 episodes and it didn't land for me personally. I appreciate a lot of other people liked it. In the middle, it had sort of an interesting concept, but ultimately ended like every other movie with one goodie, one baddie fighting over who's going to win scenario, which isn't different, whereas this is...
My prediction is every
Are
single...
we recording this? Just let me check we're recording this. In fact, let me write this down so I can refer to it later.
Let me give you some notation paper. It's not anything that you're going to need to be judged upon.
I'll judge that.
Just say, all right, Judge Renslayer. Every single show that you watch on Disney that you have an affinity via the movies, you will love. Any show that is a woke, no name, just for padding, so Ms. Marvel, Ironheart, anything like that you don't know, you won't like, or it won't hit the mark. But I guarantee you that any other show, Secret Invasion, I'm going to say She-Hulk, it might not resonate for you. Moon Knight, maybe not, I reckon will be pretty good. And the ones that you don't know, you're going to... Because WandaVision, if you want to be critical about it, and I'm very happy to be critical, I think it was a good show, but it wasn't going to go anywhere because it was to round up that character and throw one of them into a movie, which will round off their story.
Which is a concern I have with Hawkeye, and it was a concern I have with Black Widow. I shan't say whether or not that came to fruition or not, but those feel like, we didn't give them the chance to finish off their story arcs in Endgame, so let's tie those loose ends up so that we can start fresh.
Yeah.
That's not what we're after at the minute, is it?
If you think the Hulk's injured...
Hulk's armless, innit? He's totally harmless.
He's harmless. Although he would spark you out with his other fist.
That's true.
He would give you a good Mephisto-ing. Captain America's
too old now. He's got arthritis.
Yeah, he arguably started the Time Wars by going back to look after Peggy Carter for a shag.
Well, Immortus clearly didn't mind that Captain America went back in time to get some.
Technically, in episode 1, you did see Peggy Carter get arrested. Maybe they sorted that out. But anyway, Iron Man's dead. Hawkeye's going to retire at the end of the season. WandaVision's turned into Scarlet Witch. Vision's still dead. So what?
Black Widow's dead.
Black Widow's dead.
Or is she dead? Because we've now got multiverses.
Marvel tend to keep people dead.
No, they don't.
Well, who's come back?
Fella from S.H.I.E.L.D.
Coulson.
And we were told that Patch McGee.
Oh, that famous Marvel character. Stan Lee was up all day doing that.
Nick Fury. He's been dead a million times. Loki's been dead. Has Thor been dead?
No,
I've just made that up.
Although Thor did do the voice in last week's episode of The Frog.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
I mean, they've got scope to bring her back in, because I'm not saying these things because anything particularly happens in the movie that I'm referring to. What I'm saying is that if there are 4 quadrillion timelines, there are 4 quadrillion Black Widows minus the one who we've seen die at the hands of the Soul Stone. So it is theoretical that you wind up with Black Widow again.
Based on how this show's gone, there is the option. But I'm saying that in the interests of Marvel keeping their tapestry not exploding everywhere, you're going to have to at some point just round down, because you're introducing umpteen new characters. As much as Marvel's very good at keeping this weaving going on, there'll come a point where it'll get unhinged. The shows that are coming on TV are closure, and I don't think we're going to enjoy them as much as Loki, because either we don't know who they are and we haven't got enough value added to them, or we've kind of gone, well, this
is going to be the problem with Hawkeye, isn't it?
Saying,
I feel we're going off piste a little bit, but the guy's got a bow and arrow, that's it. And we've just had a series where we're discussing time and controlling all of time and everyone within the confines of that time, and got a fellow with a bow and arrow. I quite enjoyed Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I know it's been given a bit of a bagging, but I thought it was alright. I found it perfectly really enjoyable. Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But when I look back at it off the back of this, the scales of importance of the galaxy, they were crying over jobs and food, whereas Loki is like the existence of everything all the time. And I feel Hawkeye's going to be in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier camp, and it's a bit of a problem when you go out into the galaxy. It's like, I've now found a whole new universe and you want me to go back to the boring front garden I've been stuck in. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but you know what I mean. No, it's like, ooh, shiny new thing over there.
But let's break it down. You've got Loki who can create a really shit duvet cover, and you've got a guy who doesn't get a loan off the bank manager who's trying to repair a fish and shit. I was like, I'm not being funny, we helped you with the snap. I was like, yeah, you're not having a loan for your house. Doesn't make any fucking sense, does it?
No.
And so we got Loki who goes, do you want a bit of cover? Done, there you go.
Well, that's a bad example because that cover was shit.
That's a very good example because the cover was shit. He still managed to magic it up to be twice as big as the shit. Whereas the other guy goes, I kind of saved humanity.
While staring at a moon hurling towards him.
Yeah, having a quick chat about the weather, and he's like, oh, about a dynamite, don't worry about it, let's have another shrimp on the barbie. Whereas the other guy goes, I've saved humanity. If I'm a massive tyrant, can I get a loan on my house? No. What? The whole thing doesn't even make sense. And then he gets stopped by the police. That for me lost itself, and WandaVision, although was creatively wonderful, again was closure for that character.
I'm just interested in how they keep me interested in that.
We were talking about this on episode 1. The reason you like Loki is you've known him from the first Avengers film.
It's quite interesting they've used an old character to basically introduce the whole new arc and world that we're going to be delving into over the next few phases.
Falcon, Winter Soldier, Vision and Wanda Maximoff weren't even included until the last 6 movies.
Yeah, Loki was in before though.
Loki was in before. Everyone loves a villain, and he isn't just a villain, he's an anti-villain.
Just saying, referring back to my previous comments. Whenever. But he's nuanced, which is why people have always liked Loki, because he's a baddie, but he's kind of a reason why he's a baddie, and people can empathise to a degree, obviously not to the point where it's like mass killing, but they can go, oh, I felt lonely, or I felt unloved, or I've been orphaned, or I've had a terrible secret thrown upon me and I didn't know. People in various walks of life can all go, yeah, I can empathise with that, and I can see why you could go down that track, and I hope he'll pull it back. And he sort of does flitter between the good and the bad, doesn't he?
Much the same as me looking at your crotch. I hope you pull it back. That's why we like him, and that's why the show has ended with me being suitably satisfied. I haven't got any questions. I'm intrigued how it's going to go. Actually more excited, and it's given me a Sonic the Hedgehog booster pill to look forward to the movies coming out now. We've had COVID and we've been locked down in our houses, and we're going, we're not going to go to the cinema, or we're not seeing this. Now, having seen Loki and knowing where it's going, I'm more excited.
Should we go through the Easter eggs?
We've covered a few of them. So I mentioned the various quotes at the very beginning, mentioned the Citadel at the end of time, which I mentioned in last week's episode, draws from the 2 characters from the comics, him being He Who Remains, and changed his backstory, so I mentioned that. I mentioned the 4th timekeeper. We see the statue broken on the floor. He Who Remains in the comics created 4 timekeepers. At some point the timekeepers were replaced because they either died or whatever, and he took over, but maybe we'll see the 4th one at some point in the future. There was a nice callback to Doctor Strange's apple.
I beg your pardon.
When he's practicing his mystical arts, he uses
to eat and remove and mould the carrot. The apple.
He's practicing on the eye of Agamotto, isn't he?
There's so many innuendos you're just throwing up there. You're just firing at me.
In this episode, Immortus is eating an apple, so there's a bit of a callback to that.
Hang on a minute. He's eating an apple. He properly makes a meal of that apple, though, doesn't he? I mean, who puts the apple down mid-eat?
It goes brown, doesn't it, of course?
Well, of course it does, but he's not bothered. He just keeps picking it up and having a mouthful, putting it down. It did irritate me the way he was eating the apple. Plus, when people are crunching apples, it's just generally irritating to listen to.
I suppose it's more difficult to deliver a monologue when you've got a mouthful of apple. We find out Judge Rinslayer's name.
Judge Rinslayer.
The pen is the mystery, isn't it, that you brought up in the episode 1, because you were trying to work out whether Mobius...
I thought it was Mobius. I was wrong, thank you.
That was your prediction.
Well referred to on that. Dick.
That was your prediction in the first 5 minutes of that show. Obviously, she's from Ohio School. I mentioned 2018 being a possible link to the snap. Then she changed the name in the comics to Rebecca Tormenay because she had a big fallout with Kang. Mentioned earlier that Nathaniel Richards is a 31st century character who has explained whilst eating an apple about the multiverse war that was referred to in episode 1 by Miss Minutes, and he broke down the barriers between worlds to make alternate versions of himself, and he explains that he goes by different names. times, and we're going to see Kang the Conqueror in the next Ant-Man film. We know from the comics that Nathaniel Richards, Immortus, Ramatut and Iron Lad are in fact...
Iron Lad? He
Iron
sounds
Lad.
like he's from Yorkshire.
Basically.
Hey, Iron Lad.
He went to Huddersfield
Come here, D.
and realised he wasn't going to waste his time and went back.
Thy knows, thy's a hero.
Then we have the huge twist at the end. The Kang statue has changed from being the giant tea keeper. Don't touch my tea. He's from Yorkshire. He's keeping hold of the tea. The timekeeper monument that was there in the library, that's now changed, which had a little bit of a Tim Burton version of Planet of the Apes. Have you ever seen that one?
Yeah.
I've seen the original, which is probably better. Tim Burton put a spin on it and had the Lincoln statue with an ape's head.
Was that the one with Mark Wahlberg in?
It was the very same. The twist at the end of the original with Charlton Heston, who has made some pretty decent films when he was alive.
Never heard of him.
Have you not?
I'm
Of course you have.
joking. Doesn't he go around promoting shooting people these days? Don't sue me, people. I'm joking.
he's right.
He does promote owning things that do shoot people.
He does indeed. He was in the original, and the twist of that was he thought he was on a different planet, but in fact it was in the future. And the end of the scene, spoilers, but it's 1970, so if you haven't seen it, get a telly. Basically, the Statue of Liberty is poking out of the ground.
What?
I know. So he actually hasn't gone to a different planet. He's on Earth in the future. Loki season 2 is kind of guaranteed.
That was a great post-credit spoiler, though, because I know normally they sort of give a taster for other things. It wasn't. It was quite literally a stamp going, we're announcing that this isn't going to be the last you see of Tom Hiddleston. And we all went, ooh,
absolutely.
I'll take that.
For me, was just confirmation of it's a very good show, supported by the fact that episode 1 was watched by 890,000 households, which was more than the opening episode of WandaVision or Falcon. Just straight away in it,
Yeah.
seal of approval. And then really an open-ended question: what does the future hold for the MCU? We know that Doctor Strange is in Spider-Man. We know that the several characters from different Spider-Man films, example Doc Ock, is going to be in Spider-Man. We know Loki and Wanda will be in Doctor Strange 2.
Well, there's obviously the rumours of all the Spider-Men being
Well,
in
yeah,
Spider-Man.
there's all of those, and there's different villains. They reckon they're going to take one of the villains from each of the different iterations.
Yeah, Fox. Thingy Fox.
Yes.
Not Michael Fox. Just making that shit up. Let me
Dr. Fox.
No.
Samantha Fox. Topless.
Megan Fox.
Megan Fox.
No, what
Tape
the
hot
hell's
pants.
his name?
James Fox.
What film's he been in?
He's been in Collateral.
Jamie Fox. Jamie Fox he's supposed to be in it, isn't he?
He's playing Electro.
Electro.
Yeah, although the guy who played Rhino hasn't been asked back. I think the guy who played Sandman, he's back. So they're taking the villains.
Apparently he had the horn.
All that Viagra. Paul Giamatti, that's his name.
Yeah.
He's a good guy. I don't know him.
Oh, he's a mate. Yeah, you know.
Man down the pub told me he's a good actor. You watch Billions, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, every time I see him, he's getting whipped. That's a different story.
Told you, he's got the horn.
Behind closed doors, though. And the what if, which fits in nicely after the events of Loki.
So what's next with the MCU that's going to follow on from this? We've got
We've got Shang-Chi, which is very exciting. May even tie into a prediction I made in the Captain Marvel.
Here we go again, people.
Captain Marvel podcast, where I said, would we see a Thunderbolts series? We're going to have the Eternals.
Yeah.
That's going to open us up to all of those people who we've never seen before.
You see, I don't know anything about the Eternals, but I'm quite excited about them now because of the Loki series and because we've been opened up into all that stuff. And I know that that's sort of where Wanda's headed, and that's where Doctor Strange has already been dipping his pool, and this is where Ant-Man and the Wasp are kind of dipping in and out of as well. So I'm excited by that. Shang-Chi.
And the Legend of the Ten Rings.
Again, I don't know an awful lot about him. He feels more like he's Earth-based, but with mystical powers. So
yeah, he is Earth-based. What I would recommend, and I've got no evidence to suggest why I'm saying this, is I would take the...
Hang on, let me check its recording.
I would take the Eternals, Shang-Chi and the others, like we did with certain movies before Thanos, house the rest of them in this multiverse storyline, because I think it's its own thing.
They'll be creating their own little structure, which they'll then work into.
I think that's in its bubble here, and they'll solve all these problems. People aren't going to watch every single show, and they're going to go, I don't understand, and they're going to lose viewers. So I think that's in its own bubble, and I think surrounding that is Black Widow, the Eternals, Shang-Chi, Spider-Man,
Thor. Do you think Loki's going to wind up in Thor? He's probably not, is he? Given his current predicament.
I've been led to believe that you're going to get a cameo of the actor Loki that we saw in Dark World. Matt Damon.
From Team America is a puppet. Obviously the Thunderbird thing before Matt Damon's lawyers get in touch. Because I like Matt Damon, by the way.
Yeah,
brilliant in
good.
The Bourne Identity.
Absolutely.
And many other films, of course.
Good Will Hunting was a very good film. He's going to reoccur with his thespian parody of Loki.
Right.
So we might get Loki of a sort.
No, that doesn't count as being a Loki. Tom Hiddleston's Loki.
Are you not going to throw that joke you put in normally?
Or Silver.
Is he keeping it?
Sylvia.
Keeping it low key now?
No, not keeping it low key. I'm hoping we'll get low key and get the low key we want.
Well, you never know. I mean, he's on a roll, isn't he? Good old Tom. I think those singly be on their own, and then the others will pop in, and what they will do is they'll launch other stuff. So we've already seen in the first trailer, but when they released the second trailer for Shang-Chi, you saw Abomination. We know Abomination is going to appear in She-Hulk. We know that Thunderbolt Ross, that we saw in Civil War, Endgame, he's going to appear in She-Hulk. We also know where Abomination's been and why he was able to escape, because obviously the snap, and where he's been hiding. They very cleverly blocked all that out. We also know in Shang-Chi, Doctor Strange's sidekick, he's in that as well, so there's a connective tissue to Doctor Strange. The other films that are coming out, there's crossovers to other characters, but we know Blade's coming out, don't we?
Well, I mean, if you think before we got to Thanos, we'd had 3 Thor movies to set up the Thor world, we'd had 3 Captain America movies, we'd had 3 Iron Man movies, we'd had 2 Avengers movies, so we'd had a lot of stuff that had been its own little world that had started to blend in. Obviously we're going to get the same. It's just so exciting, isn't it?
The mind boggles just how far they can go with this, and now they own all of the rights. The Netflix rights have reverted back.
Do you think we're going to be old men on our deathbed when we're in phase 41 going to our kids, find out what happens and tell me before I die, because I remember the first phase?
I do often think about how far I'll get before I'm on my way out.
Yeah.
I probably won't have any kids, but I'll be telling it to myself because I'll have dementia. I'll be talking to myself in the room, rocking whilst covered in bingo pen. Telling myself how I remember the Iron Man film in the good old years of 2008.
Oh, good days. So, what are you going to give this episode out of 10?
I'm going to give this a 9, and you're going to giggle. The reason why it's not a 10, as I began the episode, not a lot happened, but a lot happened. It wasn't enough to give it a 10, because the stuff that's going to happen hasn't actually happened. What it's done, it's the promise of what's to come. So I think it was solid 9, 36 minute episode. I'm excited. Probably got a point simply by having a season 2.
Yeah.
What about you?
I'm going to give it a 9 as well. It loses the point only because of the TVA bits, and I'm sure what they've done is they've set up something for next season, but those TVA bits felt unnecessary and actually took me out of the bit I was really engrossed in, which was the Loki and Chang Loki and Kang bit.
Can you just say it again? Because that's hilarious. That sounds like my food order.
It's alright, you'll refer to it next time. But yeah, it kept on taking me out, and the bits they did in the TVA didn't feel like. So we've got all the TVA staff now knowing that the variants, but the minds have now been wiped, so what's the relevance of that? Renslay's disappeared off somewhere unknown, so we don't really care at the moment because we don't really know what's going on there. Morbius is no longer, he didn't overthrow the TVA, he's now someone we don't, so none of it feels like it's of interest or relevance at this moment in time, and so it loses a point for that. But for me, it was brilliant, ticked all the boxes, and because there wasn't any crash bang and wallops, which normally are top of our wish list.
The dual purpose of the episode is to set up this season 2, which is why you had the TVA stuff, and then all the Loki Sylvie stuff is movie centric. I still maintain, I don't think they have been wiped, I don't think they know the variants, I just think that the resulting outcome of Immortus / He Who Shall Not Be Spoken Of has died because of timey-wimey stuff.
I know, but we could have found that bit out at the end in the way that we did. I didn't need to see Judge Renslayer kicking Morbius's ass and then going through. I didn't need to see B Cream 52 showing C24 a pen and Judge Renslayer pre-Judge Renslayer days. None of that feels like it was necessary or relevant, and that's not a criticism. That's why I didn't get a 10.
If it's around the blip time, it's a extinction level event where she would be able to hide. We know that it's a different time frame is because no guy turned up with a bag and a chisel and has just chiseled off someone's face in the time it's taken Loki to get back from the Citadel. That's changed like that. The same as the monkey on the Planet of Apes statue change. Something that's happened here has affected that timeline. That sets up little questions for us moving into season 2, but we're also excited about what we're going to see in the movies.
I'm just excited.
If they're the worst things that have come out of this, it's pretty good going.
Absolutely. If you're excited too, let us know. The 2 marks at thepodstation.co.uk. Go on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We're on the 2 marks. Just type that in and you should be able to find us. Subscribe to the channel, the 2 marks. You'll get all of the feeds and all of the previous other shows that we've done. We do Marvel stuff, we do films, we do Star Trek Discovery stuff, we've got Star Trek Picard show. So if any of that pushes your buttons, go and check it out. Give us a review.
5 stars.
Preferably. And if you don't give us 5 stars, just give us some stars.
Effort.
And don't forget the competition.
Answer that question.
Go back like Mark has done in this episode and just check exactly what he said and what he did, and then you'll find out the answer.
Due diligence, my friend.
Exactly.
Due diligence. Anyway, thank you for listening.
Indeed. Thank you very much, guys.
Excelsior!
Get social at The Two Marks on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Also check them out on YouTube.